got another question from a listener, this time Pat Davis, who asks, I listened to a podcast with Ben Lewis on Oswald Spengler. That was a few months ago now. Do you personally believe that our culture is exhausted and all that lies in front of us is managed decline, or are we somehow going to buck the trend and reach new and hitherto unprecedented heights? So the gist of that episode about Spengler, and indeed the gist of Spengler's work, is that if the conventional progressive narrative of history sees history as having a linear shape, where we go from being less enlightened, less affluent, worse in every way, really, to become steadily better and better over time. The civilizational cycles model of history, of which Spengler is one intellectual proponent, sees history as having a cyclical shape. So civilizations rise and then they peak and then they fall. And Spengler is not alone in thinking that Western civilization has passed its peak and is now in a decline phase. Now, it's very common to compare Western civilization at its current moment with the fall of Rome. There are some parallels. I think, though, that one of the complicating factors for us is that we are far more technologically sophisticated than the Romans ever were. For all of their achievements, we have surpassed them quite considerably. No civilization has ever sent men to the moon before us. No civilization has ever invented the internet and electricity and all of these things before us. So that does put us in a different position. It doesn't mean that we are entirely immune to the civilizational cycles model, which does seem to be a very reliable one. And these cycles do tend to be around the kind of 500 to 1,000 years mark. So we are overdue for collapse. But I think it does suggest that we are likely to experience it differently. I think crucially, one of the things that is likely, and that's a good thing in my view, is that there will be some pockets of Western civilization that not just survive, but continue becoming ever more technologically sophisticated. They're likely to be holdouts in some parts of the world. It's not likely that the whole of the West is going to be preserved indefinitely. But, thinking about someone like Elon Musk, he's a person who is absolutely determined to resist civilizational collapse, including by having human colonies on Mars. Whether or not he achieves that goal, I think that it is figures like Musk who are our best hope, I think, of bucking the historical trend. And I kind of go back and forth on this question. I feel very ambivalent about technology. I kind of hold to the Homer Simpson view of what Homer Simpson says of alcohol, which is that it is the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. I think that that's probably true of technology. And the risk with technology is that you end up with this technological cascade that Ted Kaczynski, among others, described, where you create some new technology and then it creates problems for you, and you have to solve those problems with further technology. And eventually you reach the point where you create a technology that causes problems that you cannot solve. Global warming, for instance, is an example of a problem that has been caused by technology, by the creation of the internal combustion engine, really, and also by the enormous explosion in population that we've seen in the 20th century. The technological breakthroughs that have led to this outcome have all brought enormous amounts of good with them. They have also brought enormous problems. Now, climate change surely is one of those problems that can be solved technologically. I really, really don't think that the Just Stop Oil Extinction Rebellion sort of position that we need to have radical degrowth and have 7 billion people return to Iron Age lifestyles. I think, one, that's just not going to happen in democracies. No population is going to accept that fate voluntarily. And two, I'm not even sure if it would work, because it's actually middle income countries that are the most damaging to the environment. Once you get actually into the high income range, you can have much more sophisticated infrastructure like nuclear power. You can have recycling, all of this stuff, which actually lessens the impact on the environment. It's countries like China and India, which are currently actually causing the most pollution and so forth. And we have to transition through that middle income phase in order to get back to this imagined sort of primitivist state of nature where we're all treading very lightly on the environment. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it should happen. The way that we break through the climate change problem is by creating new technologies, using technologies we already have, like nuclear power and so on. Now, something to take seriously, although on that point, is what Nick Bostrom, who's a futurist at the University of Oxford, described as the black ball problem. So this is where you imagine every time you create some new technology, it's like you're reaching into a bag. You can't see what's in there. And you reach in and you pull out a ball, balls of different colours, and this is a metaphor for the fact that every technology has some unintended consequences that you can't foresee. And you can't know what they will be until you actually invent and use the technology. And Bostrom's idea is that eventually we will pull out the black ball, and this is the technology which will destroy us, which is so existentially risky to the human species that we can't use it safely. I think that's a very fair point. We might eventually reach the black ball. Equally, I don't at all welcome the collapse of civilization. And I think people who romanticize, like some eco-types who romanticize the going back to the hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle, it is true that hunter-gatherers are probably in some ways happier than people in modern industrialized nation and more content. They also have really, really difficult lives. One of the very important things that I don't want to return to, even in our relatively recent history, is infant mortality rates of 40 to 50%, which seems to be our human species norm. Like before the mid to late 19th century in Britain and some rich parts of the world, much later in most parts of the world, we did have infant mortality, or child mortality rates, I should say, of between 40 and 50%. So 40 to 50% of children would die before they turned 15. Now that figure is less than 1%. And even in poor parts of the world, it's much, much, much lower. I don't want to return to that. I really, really, really don't want to return. No one wants to return to that. And I think that we should think very seriously when we talk about sort of environmental degrowth, about what that really means. It means not having modern hospitals. It means not having electricity. It means not having running water. It means becoming, at least initially, becoming a third world country, and then, eventually even worse than that, right? If you continue on the degrowth path. So Spengler is not, a happy, like you can see why it's much more attractive to believe in the progressive model of history, because if you really think that things are just getting better and that they will keep getting better with minimal input from us, then that's a very happy vision. I think it's not a very plausible vision, though. I think the civilizational cycles vision is much, much more likely. The challenge for us then is, not to be complacent about the inevitability of progress, to be very, very vigilant against the fragility of civilization. And yes, I suppose the point that we're at right now is whether we can be sufficiently innovative to create enough velocity, technologically speaking, to escape. And indeed, literally thinking about Musk's plans to colonize Mars, to escape that downward trend that has trapped every civilization until ours. So in answer to your question, Pat Davis, can we buck the trend and reach new and hitherto unprecedented heights? Maybe. It's not guaranteed, though.